Ron here, and today I would like to discuss the world being on fire. So, over the past, let's say 6 months, maybe the past year, we've observed something terrifying. All four corners of the world are on fire. There have been devastating wildfires in Africa, in California, in the rainforest, and now in Australia. Thousands, tens of thousands of people have been displaced by these wildfires. And there's been damage done, but the monetary damage is entirely secondary to the ecological damage. Like, I don't think I have to explain how this is a bad thing in an ecological sense. The more CO2 there is in the atmosphere, the faster that the globe warms up, and the faster that the globe warms up, the more wildfires there are. And the more wildfires there are, the more CO2 gets put into the atmosphere. It's a very straightforward feedback loop. And there are other people who can explain that, if that's what you want, but I want to describe what some of the consequences of this is going to be. So, when I first heard about the displacement specifically, the first thing that I thought is that all those people are still going to need to live somewhere, or they're going to die. And that was back in 2014, when there was sectarian violence ravaging the Middle East, which is still ravaging the Middle East. Sectarian violence, which is being aided and abetted by a drought that has affected that entire region for the better part of a decade. As far back as that, I've been contemplating the question of displacement, and I had been hoping that the ugliest parts of it wouldn't come around, but we're seeing those things start to rev up. We're seeing the ugliest parts of what could happen. Concentration camps, internment camps at the border, and people packed into rooms like sardines. Inhumane treatment of people fleeing these awful, awful situations. It's monstrous. And it's only going to get worse, because people are not going to stop fleeing from places that are literally on fire. Something I would expect to see is an increase in real estate speculation, specifically because people will be aware, especially now that there are wildfires in more affluent places like California and Australia. Yeah, they will be made aware that there are people who are willing to pay good money to rent a place in somewhere that is not threatened by the wildfires that are consuming the four corners of the earth. So, if you rent a place in a fairly stable region, like I do, you need to be prepared for that rug to be pulled out from under you, because depending on who your renter is, they might sell you out. They might throw you out on the street in favor of someone who's able to give them a bit more money. Something I would doubly expect to see is the most impoverished people, people who get assistance from the Section 8 housing, them to get thrown out in mass at some point. But that would be like midway through things being really, really bad. It would be like the housing crisis, but worse. Something else that we're going to see is food shortages, because a lot of these places do grow crops. Like the wildfires in California. California grows something like 70% of the food that people eat in the country, the vegetation. Anyway, I'm to understand that might not be entirely correct, but it grows a big chunk of the food. Here in the Midwest, we don't grow corn or soybeans for people, we grow them for livestock. Or ethanol fuel or other things. But we're already seeing a reduction in the amount of certain goods. There was a major potato famine, for example, that's going to affect the price of potatoes a significant amount. I remember reading about this, and someone was incensed that instead of saying there was a major potato famine and people were suffering, the news article mentioned, your french fries are going to be a little bit more expensive. And that's actually a multiplicator. The worst parts of this are not going to affect the first world. The worst parts of this aren't going to affect me and probably you until it's too late for either of us to do anything about it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The third thing that we're going to see as a consequence of the other two things, the displacement and famine, is we're going to see... I don't think war is the right word. There's a difference between migration and forceful migration. People are going to start going places and, like, not leaving. Or fighting back against people who try to make them leave. I'm surprised every day that, like, that hasn't happened here in the United States. I'm surprised that people haven't, like, put their dukes up when they're confronted by people from immigrations and customs. I mean, they know where they're going. And, like, the people who work for ICE, on a worldwide scale, are the nice ones. There are already migrants to China who are treated significantly worse than we treat people here in the United States. So the real question is, what do we do? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm not telling you these things because I have some grand solution that's going to fix things. I'm telling you these things because we need to prepare for them to be happening. We need to be aware that they're going to happen, and we need to figure out how to head them off in some capacity. Like, here in the United States, we have 5 times as many empty homes as we have homeless people. We can house a lot more people. The problem, homelessness doesn't exist because there are too many people. Homelessness exists because people are too rich and are speculating on housing and shit like that. We could bring more people here. We could pressure government organs to do that, but that, in the current climate, that would be exceptionally difficult. Also, never forget, the shithound, Poopin' Mitch McConnell, does not give a fuck what you say. Poopin' McConnell only cares about his money. We don't need to stockpile food, but it might be useful to stockpiling food for other countries. I don't know. This is going to be a big problem, and we need to head it off in some capacity. Yeah. I'm sorry. This one's really depressing. But it's a depressing kind of mood, isn't it? Maybe there's a better world. I hope there's a better world somewhere. And until we get there, I want you to take care of yourselves, alright?